Art is long, and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Longfellow. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, in my church office where the lighting is real weird, so sorry. But I wanted to continue my little dive into English lit, and since we're in the spooky month, let's start out with some Edgar Allan Poe. So when I was in school, like I'm talking high school, college, um, always one of my favorite, if not my favorite, writer. Well, I think Dickens is really my favorite writer overall, but one of the presents I asked for when I was probably 15 or 16 was the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. And my parents obliged. And as you can see, it has been well loved through the years, but I cannot bear to part with it. And I thought, since we are at the beginning of the spooky month, what better than, the king of all spookiness? And we're going to read The Telltale Heart, one of my absolute favorites. If you've never experienced this particular short story, Poe is a master of the short story, which you would think short stories are harder to write than novels. But to get all of the information in just a few pages and leave you with a complete experience, that takes a lot of talent. And he's very good at what he does. So let's not delay any further. Let's read The Telltale Heart, shall we? True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object? There was none. Passion? There was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now at this point, you fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I first put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head in the opening so far that I could see the old man as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been as wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern. Cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it so that just a single thin ray of light fell upon the vulture eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and the old man not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps the old man heard me, for he moved suddenly, as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with thick darkness, for the shutters were closed and fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it steadily, steadily. I had got my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet and still. For another hour, I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime, I did not hear the old man lie down. He was sitting up in bed, listening, just as I have done, night after hearkening night to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew that it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh, no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just as midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in his bed. His fears had ever since been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It's nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crawling on the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found it all in vain. All in vain. Because death, in approaching the old man, had stalked with his black shadow before him, and the shadow had now reached and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard me, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing the old man lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow of my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damn spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the senses? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, much such as a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of the drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker, louder, and louder at every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. I grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of the old house, so strange a noise exists, excited me to uncontrollable wrath. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and kept still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me, and the sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked. Once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then sat upon the bed and smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the walls. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was a stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. The old man was stone dead, and his eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, so that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. The information had been lodged at the police department, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek? I said it was my own dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house and bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. They sat while I answered cheerily. They chatted of familiar things, but ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued to gain definitiveness until at length I found the noise was not in my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound. Much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had sat and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, louder, louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no more, no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. Now and again, hark! Louder, louder, louder! Villains! I shrieked. Disassemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Well, that was fun, and I hoped you enjoyed it. That was fun for me, so I think I might do a couple of readings out of the Tales of Heresy from the Horus Heresy series, because those are good and Halloweeny. Oh, let's be real. Most anything out of the Horus Heresy would be good and Halloweeny. I might do the whole Angel Exterminatus tale that comes out of the Angel Exterminatus with Fulgrim, because he does this whole thing, Aisha's Doom and the rest of it. It's the kind of thing I love. I think that's why I like Warhammer so much, is it's this kind of old English Gothic writing. It appeals to my inner literature snob, so I'm real into it. But I hope you like that. I know I'm going to do The Raven later on this week. I do still want to react to some zombie horror-y stuff, but me and this reaction software haven't gotten along yet. I'm going to figure it out, but just enjoy whatever I do until then. If you enjoy it, I enjoy it. I enjoyed that. That was fun. I'm going to do another one. It's been a long time since I have flexed my theater chops. So how cool was that? Sorry about the lighting. I guess I will bring my itty bitty, I have a little bitty ring light, so I guess I'll bring it here when I record here. But yeah, that was fun. So let me know what you think. Let's talk about it. Is there anything else you'd like for me to read?